Welcome, everybody, to episode 279 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, June 28th, 2017. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by Jay Tripp.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, sir. Boy, it's been a beautiful couple of summer days here. I mean, we're talking about the end of June, and it's hoodie weather. Global warming, right?
There's hoodie weather here, too. Yeah. I'm in a button down. I'm wearing a blanket and a poncho. I'm all bundled up.
At the end of June. How about that? So, we had a great show last week. A heck of a roundtable episode about WordCamp Europe. Had a lot of great feedback on that. One thing I've noticed is that we've yet to get an iTunes review since you've joined the show. Now, look, I'm not correlating anything. I'm not tying, one thing to another. But listeners out there, if you could take just a couple minutes of your time, please go over to iTunes, give us a review. It could be 1-star, 5-star, it doesn't matter. Just tell me what you really think of the show. Especially let me know of what you think of Triple J as the co-host, because based on your feedback, he may or not be here next weekend.
Wow.
So,
there's a chopping block, and I am on it. I am balancing intricately.
Hey, I gotta please the fans, So
people they're not going to say anything unless they're unhappy, and so I like to think that no reviews is really a best case scenario. Everyone's just enjoying the show and they don't want to complain. That's what I'm going to keep telling myself until you fire me, I guess.
Do I fire you from a job you don't have?
It's true.
Or I don't pay you for. Anyways, see what a great relationship we have. But anyways, we'd really appreciate it if you give us a review and let us know what you think of the show, and we'll read it on the air. Be cool stuff. So today we have a pretty cool guest. We have some news that came out earlier this week about underscores.me, which is a starter theme that Automattic just created. And on our show today, we have a guest named David Kennedy, who is Automattic likes these cool, they titles don't really matter over there. And David is a theminator. So we'll learn about what that is. And he works for Automattic, the company behind WordPress.com, not the parent company of WordPress, for all those in the media out there. And a host of other services. David wrangles themes for WordPress.com, making them the best they can be, and ensuring everyone can find the theme they love. And he's also an accessibility evangelist who loves the open web and open source code, who contributes to WordPress and the WordPress community. And David, very timely for you to be on the show today, and thank you very much for gonna give us the inside scoop on the future of underscores.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's, it's the first time you're on the show, so this is sort of your initiation here on WordPress Weekly. Why don't you tell us and the audience your WordPress origin story? How did you get involved with WordPress?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. I think like most people who got involved in WordPress pretty early, like I started a blog. I used to actually be a journalist before I got into code. And while working for the newspaper I worked for, that's how I started in web development, because I was one of the only people there brave enough to dive into the code of the website, which was actually at the time built in Joomla. So that's kind of how I started to cut my teeth in web development. And then from there, I wanted to start a blog and write more because I was interested in writing. So I just stumbled across WordPress and, fired up a blog, and the rest is history. I was a copywriter for a while, and then decided to go back to school for web development stuff. And once there, that's when I started. I knew WordPress. I knew what it was. I was using it really more as a user, less as a developer at that point. But then I started diving into theme stuff and building my own custom themes at that point. And gradually started to think about how I could help the project, and got involved that way. So
the days of get sidebar and parameters and find this line of code in the theme here to add support for this plugin here. Oh, I remember those days.
A lot of people are still in those days, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, that's like current status, really.
Awesome. So how did you at what point did you sort of look into joining Automatic as a theminator. And what does a theminator do?
Well, that's just my made up title, because if you have any title, you might as well have some fun with it. I'm essentially a theme wrangler, which means I work on the theme team at Automatic, and I do all sorts of stuff related to themes. One of my primary duties is to help all of our premium theme shops on WordPress.com. I make and launch themes. I fix bugs for themes. I sometimes work on some of the higher level code on WordPress.com that handles theme related things. So really, what I love about working on themes is that you get to touch a lot of different things, and generally, I think a lot of theme designers, theme developers are pretty generalists, right? Like they do a little bit of everything. They might have a strength in design or development, but they usually do a little bit of both, and that's why I love themes.
So Jeff says that titles don't matter, and I tend to disagree strongly with that. I think that having the ability to give yourself a title at Automatic means that they matter immensely. And so is your Theminator title like a Terminator reference, or is it just because you like the way it sounded? How did you come up with Theminator?
It is a Terminator reference. I sort of see it as, destroying like bad themes, taking out bad themes.
Yeah, I mean, when I see Theminator, or when I see the title Theminator, I picture in my head a badass taking out themes.
Yeah, that's I guess a pretty good analogy.
I like it. I like that you're a time traveling theme, you're like the time traveling theme police that just goes through and like picks out like all the nuances and accessibility issues or like weird things that are in themes, and then takes them out so that they no longer negatively affect themes throughout time and space. It's like the best possible theme title that anyone could really have. I think it's nicely played.
Well, I mean, since we have a theme wrangler on and you do all this work with themes, I just a question that popped in my head. What is your take on the theme landscape as we know it, both maybe inside Automatic or just general trends that you've seen in the WordPress space? And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was reading an article, I think it was by Alex Denning, and it was kind of a cool blast from the past where he talked about the rise of the WordPress magazine theme style back in 2007, 2008, where first it was Revolution by Brian Gardner, who really set the pace for the different magazine themes. And then there's a couple other ones that were really popular at the time. And a couple of the themes I've seen today are maybe just adaptations or variations of the magazine style. But generally, just with WordPress theme trends and design, what are you seeing today? Or what are you noticing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think, like, first off, right, like the theme landscape as we know it's going to change pretty soon with the coming of Gutenberg, right? Like once that really hits, I think the whole landscape is going to be very different. And obviously, talking about Gutenberg, the new editor experience for WordPress, if you're a theme designer or developer and you haven't taken a look at that, I highly encourage you to do so. This is, it's interesting to me because I think often themers, they might not think that they can control as much of the WordPress experience as they actually do control, right? A theme is really central to the WordPress experience. It's usually the front door that a user comes in through. It's usually the thing that most users interact with. And with Gutenberg, and obviously the work on the customizer that'll start after that, like this is really a chance for themers to impact the future of WordPress. And it's a pretty darn exciting time to be involved in themes. So make sure you get involved. And I guess beyond that, like I think, the landscape of theming, right? Like I think I'm a little biased. I worked on 2017, so I think like a lot of people, they want that type of layout on their homepage, right? That sort of paneled layout. And I actually see magazine themes may be becoming less popular as we go forward, as more and more people are gravitating toward experiencing the web on their mobile devices, right? Like the default layout is more of the like one column view. And in my work, like, so a few weeks ago, I worked with a few small businesses, and we built some small business websites. And the concerns I heard from real people using WordPress to build their website, they just want it to be findable and they want it to be fast, right? And I think it's pretty easy for the theme community to get caught up in the how of things, right? And we often forget about the why. And I think it's important to take a step back and, not worry so much about how we're going to do certain things, but worry about the why we're doing them, so we can think through the how more effectively.
And that actually dovetails into something we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. But let's talk about a little bit about Underscores, which was launched in February of 2012. So we're talking about 5 years ago. And Underscores was actually a fork of Toolbox, which was a starter theme used to build free and premium themes on WordPress.com. It's just kind of ironic how things go full circle here when we get to the news about what's going on with Underscores. But it was Automattic's attempt at creating a better or more flexible starter theme. So kind of tell us what you know a little bit about the history of Underscores.
Yeah, I think you covered it a lot there with Toolbox, right? Like it was, they originally launched Toolbox as a way to sort of, for lack of a better term, skin a site, right? You could just customize it with CSS, and Toolbox would provide you with the markup that you needed to make a great looking site. And if I remember my history right, what happened was a lot of people, started using it either as a parent theme, or they had like really specific CSS, so it made it really difficult for the theme team at Automattic to make changes to Toolbox to evolve it, right? Like, because if you change markup, you could potentially break people's sites. So it became really difficult. So in comes Underscores. And Underscores to this day has a little notice on GitHub and elsewhere in the documentation, like, hey, don't use this like it is. Like, don't use it as a parent theme. Like, Underscores by its very nature is meant to be customized, meant to be not used in its current form. So that's really how Underscores was born. And since then, it's very much been kind of a vanilla starter theme, right? Like, I think its success has really been because it's a good set of WordPress theming best practices without being too opinionated.
So I bring up Toolbox because it's interesting, because for the last year and a half, according to this blog post you published on ThemeShaper, the Theme Wrangler team, which you were a part of, have been experimenting with a new starter theme generator called Components. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Components was originally born out of the idea of, what if we could do more with starter themes? We often see, like, one of the most common things we see with Underscores is people fork it, right? And they make their own version, which is awesome. Like, big agencies might fork it and they might add their own build processes. We saw, before we had Sass and Underscores, we saw people forking it and adding their own flavors of Sass.
Yeah, or even frameworks like Backbone Underscores or this version of Underscores.
Yep, exactly. People doing different things with it. So we thought, like, what if we could take Underscores in a few different directions? So the idea behind Components was, it had this notion of theme types, right? So you'd have like a classic blog theme, a modern blog theme, magazine theme. And so Components would generate a different theme type with slightly different set of code and functions based on the needs of that particular theme type. So the idea was good, but as I referenced in my blog post, it got pretty darn complex pretty quickly. So I think that's an idea I think we still would like to explore and think about and iterate on. it just became obvious over time that components, wasn't going to be a place that we could carry it out farther.
Well, is that an example of over-engineering the how instead of really focusing on the why?
Definitely, definitely. I think that for me personally, that was a big lesson that I learned in working on it. Because it's so easy as an engineer to like, because you so quickly you can get down in the weeds, and because really it's just code. So ultimately, almost anything is possible, and it's really hard to remind yourself at certain points to take a step back and, well, yeah, that's possible, but should we do it, or should we do it a different way, or, well, if we do that, should we take this away since we're adding this?
One of the things we did with BuddyPress and BBPress, similar to your theme types, component types, was kind of like with language packs in WordPress core. We had template packs because plugins, they have to walk that middle ground between being a plugin that needs to integrate into a theme, and you kind of have to make your template parts pretty bland and kind of vanilla to fit in and work okay enough with all of these themes, knowing it's going to work pretty poor across every single one of them. And so the concept of like an underscores template pack for plugins to be able to leverage to get their template parts hooked in and do things. I could see there being a lot of value in that, because plugins like WooCommerce and EDD and BuddyPress and BBPress and calendar plugins have to just jump through so many hoops to get all their little bits hooked in and listening to pull in all the right template parts, that if the component part didn't work, or if it was just over engineered and not the right time or whatever it was, that maybe anyone listening might consider trying to do some sort of a underscores theme for their project or their specific thing. I know EDD has like a default theme. I think WooCommerce does too. I don't know if any of those are underscores related or started on underscores or not, but I'm curious to hear more about specifically what you think the 2-5-year plan for underscores really might be, since we're all starting to learn JavaScript deeply and you playing a little bit more with Vue and React and things like RxJS and the complexity of front-end themes and apps and things, of whether or not there's an opportunity for some React underscores magic to help people out and build more elaborate and amazing themes or not.
Yeah, I'll say before I forget, WooCommerce does have its own kind of default theme. It's called Storefront, and it is based on underscores.
Is it?
Yeah. Nice. But yeah, the future underscores is interesting. It's hard to say, really, right? Because Borg, I think, is going to change everything. I think people have been talking about JavaScript themes for a while, but we're still probably not there in terms of making a fully fledged JavaScript-based theme. I guess what I see a lot when I hear people talking about JavaScript-based themes, it's usually under the guise of like fully JavaScripting the whole experience, which I think it can be a valuable lesson for the developer, and there definitely is some user wins there too. But what I'm more interested in is more specific use cases, like using the REST API and JavaScript to accomplish things that we haven't accomplished before in theming, right? Like, so, showing that, if you're a news powered website like WTP Tavern, like more easily showing all the articles that you've read, things like that, in a more instantaneous fashion. I'm interested in that type of theming, right? Because it solves specific problems and it could potentially help, the users of a theme. But I definitely think there would be room, I think, in the future of underscores to do something along those lines. I really think underscores is just a set of WordPress theming best practices.
Yep.
Right. And like that's it as at its core. So what that becomes as we go forward, I think we'll find out.
Yep.
I think it's important not to, for the community at the whole, not to like lock ourselves into anything, right? Like, because personally, like I'm always interested in discussion, but I'm more interested in commits.
Yeah, me too.
Because like nothing really is unchangeable, right? Like especially with underscores, because it's pretty stable by its nature, right? Because it's meant to be changed. So we can pretty easily, if we like commit something and we're like, well, that wasn't, that's not working out, or we're getting problems, we can easily like revert that and go in a different direction. So I think it's a good place for experimentation.
All right, Vue or React? No, I'm only kidding. You don't have to answer that. No, you don't have to answer that question. I will say though that Gutenberg is being written in React, so that could influence a lot of theme developers and how they choose to interact with WordPress and Gutenberg. And I kind of want to stick with Gutenberg for a little bit because it's, you mentioned, maybe we can briefly talk about maybe some ideas on how it could revolutionize or change the theming landscape. But if we look at the idea of components, it's like starter themes, crafting them out of building blocks and blocks. What's Gutenberg? Well, it's a block-based editor for WordPress. But the idea of Gutenberg, one of the ideas, possibly goals, is that you create these blocks that you can then use anywhere. Maybe you could use them in widgets. Maybe you can use them in custom post types. You can use them in taxonomies. You could use them pretty much wherever. It becomes this unified system. And if we get to that point where we have these blocks of reusable content or data all through Gutenberg, and then you tie in the idea of the customizer with this, boy, now we're starting to get into this world of many, many possibilities.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. What I would like to see themes become is less focused on like all the terminology that is confusing to people who use WordPress, like widgets, the customizer, page templates.
Like custom post type still gets me.
Yeah, custom post types, post formats. Like we all know that because we've been with WordPress for a long time. But most of that stuff, if not all of it, is pretty darn confusing to someone who's new to WordPress. And that's ultimately like we're all trying to grow WordPress. We're trying to democratize publishing, and we have to start thinking about that as a barrier. So hopefully, Gutenberg helps with that a little bit, right? Because it'll put more of the control for some of that type of stuff and some of those type of patterns right in front of the user. And I'd love to see themes just be more like styles, just like more design based, right? With Gutenberg, it'll be interesting to see, but maybe a theme becomes a set of default blocks that are arranged in some sort of pre-structured way that then are styled, but then the user can, of course, unlock that and rearrange those blocks in any way, shape, or form that
just widgetize everything. Everything's a widget.
Kind of, but hopefully not as confusing. It's widgets.
Yeah. Or have a different interface where we don't have to use the widget management interface where you're dragging things between all the different sidebars. Sort of what you see is what you get visual page editor. We have a lot of page builders out there already that do that.
Yeah. That was one of the major complaints with sidebars, right? Was that you end up with sidebars in your footer. Where you're like, oh, right. that's not the side and it's not a bar. Why are they down there? Like
foot bar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But regarding themes, it's kind of mind blowing too to think about just. I wonder if the majority of people out there, new users to WordPress, when they search for a theme, they use a theme, how much of their interaction or their new user experience is through a theme that they purchase on ThemeForest. And, it's been talked about ad nauseum about, you know, what you have to do on a marketplace such as ThemeForest to compete and sell, and that's add all these doodads and whistles, and you know, which could easily be inundating for the new user. And I wonder how that's impacted sort of the perception that new users have of WordPress. You know, that it's complicated, but only because of so many doodads and admin notices and things that came with the theme that they purchased on ThemeForest or a different marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said before. Like I personally think themes are central to the WordPress experience, and I definitely think that themers on the whole have a huge responsibility to keep working really hard to make that experience better. I think Gutenberg is a great starting point to dive into that in a fantastic way to start to make that better, because there's going to be a lot of hard questions we have to answer there too, right? Like Gutenberg won't automatically solve all the problems, right? And it might make some things more confusing, right? That's just how these things go. We're essentially rebuilding a central feature of WordPress, the thing that publishes things, which is why WordPress exists. So it's a big challenge, and I think we'll need everyone involved to help make it better. So yeah, definitely.
Now, we're about halfway into the interview, but the big news I want everyone to know right now is that Underscores is not dead. I mean, that's
wow.
It's well. Here's the thing.
Wow.
You know, we at the tavern received a number of inquiries over the past few months, and in fact, there's even some issues that were created on the GitHub account asking what's going on with Underscores. There hasn't been any commits. There's no news. We tried to reach out to Automattic to figure out if it's an active project, and the answer we got back is, yeah, as far as I know, it's an active project. That's as far as we've got. And the roadmap and the future of the project was unknown at the time, despite it being an open source project and it's used by the wider WordPress community. And again, David, you published this news the other day, but what was components just taking up so much of the time, within the past 6 months to not really be able to communicate that this was coming, or was it unknown that this was what was going to happen?
Yeah, I think like we were always keeping an eye on Underscores. So it definitely was always an active project. It wasn't one that we, were thinking like, we're stopping this, like this is done. But components was an experiment. And sometimes it's hard to experiment in the confines of something that already exists. And I think components gave us that freedom to step away from Underscores, to sort of reimagine it, to rip it to shreds, which is essentially what we did. I mean, we forked Underscores and we ripped it to pieces. We built a new generator, and we really thought about a lot of things, and we experimented with a lot of things. And I really, personally, I don't consider it a true failure, because it's only really a true failure if we didn't learn anything. And I think it would have been a bigger failure if we had decided to maybe keep banging on Underscores longer, right? But we recently had a meetup. We had a meetup and we just talked it out and decided that, components probably was at a stage that we were, ready to kind of just say, okay, this isn't going to work. Let's put it aside. Let's refocus on Underscores and bring it back, and bring some of the stuff back from components. And so I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to welcome a new committer, Ulrich Poxen, who will be helping us out.
Who, by the way, is a non-automatician, which should be noted.
Great. Yeah.
So now we have the second non-automatician who has commit access. Does Philip Arthur Moore, who was added back in 2014, does he still has commit access? He
still has commit access, correct? Yeah.
So I think that was a great decision to have another non-automatician sort of as a representative of the community and participating in the project, which leads me into the question, by giving non-automaticians commit access, how do you strike a balance between the needs of Automattic and the needs of the community?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, those, Ulrich is there to definitely kind of bring some of that voice of the community. And I think finding that balance will continue to be a challenge, right? I think anytime you can bring diversity of ideas is a good thing. And I think the biggest thing we'll have to continue to do is just listen. Um, I've done this a few times in the past few days where I've closed some pull requests and people have appealed and say, "Hey, wait, no, did you think about this? Did you think about that?" And so I reopen the pull requests and hear them out.
And Jeff, I think it's important to note that the official term for not an automatician is notomatician.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that our listeners out there understand
Notomatician.
What the proper terminology is.
That's good. It's cleared up for me now too. I wasn't sure either.
Rolls off the tongue actually quite well. Notomatician.
Notomatician.
And I want to briefly go back to, you were mentioning how you don't consider components and the other aspects, the experimentation you guys were working on, as a failure. I want to mention to our listeners, and some of who may already know this, but Matt Mullenweg, from the top down, encourages experimentation at the company. He encourages teams to think outside the box and to have these. There's all these different side and pet projects within Automattic with various public GitHub repos if you wanted to check them out. And one of the examples that comes to mind is, I think it was 2 years ago. I think it was just recently after he had acquired CloudUp, and he had mentioned that a lot of the team and things they were going to do were, it was possibly, I think it was one of the first times he was going to revamp the editor. Maybe it was 2 years ago. And I remember asking him in an interview on WordPress Weekly, I said, "Well, whatever happened to that?" And he says, "Well, we got about 90% of the way there, and then the last 10% was very difficult, and there were some things we couldn't just quite work out or figure out. So we open sourced the 90%. We left it there, and there were a lot of things that we learned, and some of which were integrated into the current editor as improvements, things that they have learned from all that experimentation." So I think it's cool to realize that, yeah, it's not a failure, but anything that you learn throughout that entire process is hugely beneficial. And it's sort of like a company-wide, I don't want to say policy, but sort of a support thing, where if you could do these sort of side projects where you don't have to worry about backwards compatibility or breaking someone's site, and just see what's possible, try to make your idea a reality. Let's see if we can make this work. Maybe it's the next best thing that we could roll right into WordPress, or maybe we could just roll parts of it into WordPress, but it's kind of a cool company-wide thing at Automattic.
Yeah, I definitely see, like, there's definitely a mirror there between that story and what happened with components. And it's definitely how I see it. It was a learning experience, and I'm not sure, like, personally, I would do it again. Like, even if it meant, not committing to underscores as often as we would like, potentially going down that road again, because we learned so much. And 900 plus commits on that project that went in a completely different direction than underscores on the whole. So you can't, like I said, it's hard to do that within the confines of existing, especially an existing and mature project like underscores is. So yeah, I think it's always good to experiment, even if it means putting something aside for a while and making it a lower priority.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of roadmaps, there's a lot of people out there excited to hear the news that, hey, we're back. Underscores has got new life to it. What can users and developers expect maybe within the next few months regarding underscores?
That's a good question. I'll be honest and say the only thing we really have mapped out are looking at components and bringing in some of the things that we found there that worked really well. And a lot of these were around what we call theme user experience requirements. So doing very small things, like the one that pops in my head is where we name the widget IDs, you know, sidebar -1, sidebar -2, so that when themes switch, your widgets are kept in a sidebar and not tossed down into the abyss of the inactive widget areas. Because like for a user who's unfamiliar with that paradigm, it's very confusing and disrupting. So like little things like that, and potentially like components also had a lot of patterns. When I say patterns, I mean like, you know, some of the starter themes that it made had big hero areas and more styles. Underscores on the whole, I think, has always been very vanilla, right? Like I think that's been part of its success. It's been pretty easy to pick up because it's not too opinionated. But I think there's a little bit of room in there for it to become a little bit more opinionated and hopefully still be as easy to pick up for designers, developers, and whoever is using it.
So after the show, John's going to pick up underscores. He's going to start whipping out themes. I know it.
You know, I made a theme with underscores. I made exactly one theme using underscores, and it did exactly what I had hoped that it would do, and that it was advertised to accomplish, which was I didn't have to do all of that upfront legwork and just repetitive decision making about what to name things, where they should be, how just a lot of the markup is sort of staged and ready for you. And that was really super helpful to get that head start, because I think the majority of a WordPress theme, like David is like alluded to in the beginning, is about the design and the art that goes into it. It's about the artist and their vision and implementing it via the WordPress theme, and it's not about the very specific markup or the all. I mean, it's they want to get to designing, they want to get to implementing their vision, and the quicker that we can get anyone doing that, is the happier that everyone is. And so underscores did exactly that for me. I wish, it makes me wish that we really did have a good, reliable equivalent for plugins. I know that people have plugin boilerplates. Web Dev Studios has one, Tom McFarlane has one, a bunch of plugin boilerplates exist, but plugins can just do anything. And so we had joked, I mean, I don't know if this still is a joke or not, but to have, instead of underscores, to have an under P, like under plugin, like on some other version of an underscores for plugins, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't resonate with plugin authors, I don't think. It's great. Underscores is great. It's I'm happy to hear that it is getting at least the attention, the hopeful attention that everyone wants to give it, because it's super useful, and themes should use it if they can. It just is such a useful head start and foundation for themes.
So just before we wrap it up here with you, David, I'll leave you with this. What if any, is there a holy grail of WordPress and the way it interacts with themes, or the user experience and how they change your use themes? And I'm thinking like, where the day where people can switch WordPress themes and they don't have to worry about losing widgets. They don't have to worry about losing data, custom post types, things being rearranged, losing stuff in post formats. I would think it would be great if at some point, people could be able to switch themes and not have to worry about that, or just unexpectedly discover that the content they had there is gone, or it's been relocated. Is there any sort of holy grail of WordPress themes that you think of? Are there some overarching goal that you're striving for?
That's a good question. I think in my experience, and I think back to that site build-a-thon I did with small business customers, about a month ago, and
Yeah, that was in Detroit, right?
this one I did a smaller one in Philadelphia,
Okay.
and like I see this too when I do my support rotation at Automatic. For those that don't know, like we everyone at Automatic does a 1 week support rotation one time a year, and when you talk to real customers using WordPress, it's often like they're just trying to get that last like 10%, right? That last like they find a theme that they like, or and they're just like, I want to change this color, I want to move this thing over here, I want to put this I want to have a big hero image here. And I mean, that's really the holy grail. It's getting it to the point where everyone has uh, a site, and the look on the site is something that they can be really truly proud of. And if you're a themer, that should make you really excited, because that's, to me, like that's how the independent web wins, is making that experience feel really good to the people who are putting the content out there, and to the people who are consuming the content. That's how the independent web wins over apps, is through really, really good design, and design that is, I think, personally bespoke and individual to the site using it. And I think WordPress has a chance to put a big dent there and make a difference.
Absolutely. With work on the new user experience, the customizer obviously is going to be a huge part of this going forward, which is namely one of the reasons why it's one of the core focuses this year for the core of WordPress 2017. And we know that it's going to be heavily tied into the improvements to Gutenberg. Yeah, I mean, just being able to, I won't even get into this, but, maybe this is old man mentality, even though I'm like 32 years old. But, I look at the various page builders, and I'm like, wow, great. I could change anything I want. Or I look at themes like Underscores, where you start off from absolute scratch, and then whatever that theme has is stuff that you added to it, that you built, and it has exactly what you need for your, and I don't like either options. Like if I have Underscores and I'm creating a site or a design, it's like, I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to start adding stuff. But then if you give me a page builder, it's like, okay, so I add this here, add this here, add this here. And all it does is it makes it 100 times easier to create something that looks like crap. So, I've gotten to the point now where I just show me a site that's mostly done, something that I find that's close to what I have, and then I'll be happy with it, because I don't have the design chops to take full advantage of the page builders or to build something from scratch with Underscores.
It's funny because that was half of my motivation for using Underscores for the theme that I had built. Was I didn't want to redesign buttons and toolbars and navigation and menus, and I didn't want to go through and redesign comments and the hierarchy there, and what the forms look like, and form fields, and aligning buttons and checkboxes and inputs and this and that. And so I ended up using it for my own Twitter Bootstrap theme, because I didn't like any of the other Twitter Bootstrap options that were out there. They felt a little bit incomplete, even though they did a really good job of having awesome build processes and pulling in all the sources and lesson Sass from wherever else. But like the comments form wouldn't be fully styled or themed or rendered. It's like, how did everyone get this far and not actually finish all of the implementation of Twitter Bootstrap into it? And that's ultimately what I ended up using pretty much just to power jjj.blog, is just like an Underscores based Twitter Bootstrap theme that like everything works, but is in no way, shape, or form like the most beautiful theme that anyone has ever seen. It is just a Twitter Bootstrap theme, and I don't have to reinvent any of the typical web UI type things, because I would leave that to someone who has more of a designer's eye. And even though it was a fun experience and a good experiment for me, I'm also not like a themer per se, where I'm not the person anymore that should be deciding what all of the markup decisions are and whether or not role tags are the most appropriate thing, or whether or not we should ARIA tag this or not. Like, I used to know all of that stuff, and I can find it on the web, but I just don't have that memorized the way that I used to. So it's nice to have all of those decisions kind of pre-made. And so
decisions, not options, Jim.
That's true. That's true.
I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to ask David this question, considering he's an accessibility evangelist. I haven't mentioned accessibility once in the show, but maybe you can give us your top-down perspective on the state of accessibility in WordPress themes, whether it's on .com or just in general.
Yeah. Well, accessibility is always a challenge, right? Because it's something that's really specialized, and I think traditionally it's not something that a lot of designers or developers or UXers get a lot of training in. So that's really the challenge. It's really like I firmly believe that most people want to do right by accessibility, but they just don't have the knowledge. They haven't like figured that out yet. And that's one reason I actually have I'll do a plug here for my newsletter, Accessibility Weekly, a11yweekly.com. If you're new to accessibility, feel free to sign up, and every week you get resources and links and tutorials for learning more about accessibility. But as far as the state of accessibility and themes in general, I think it probably matches the web overall, right? There's a lot of good work being done, and there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, there's such a huge effort to try and get accessibility to be. Let's start with accessibility instead of it being on the back burner, and that seems to be a huge thing that so many projects are trying to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. I think and it's really accessibility. Actually, it is hard, but it's also a lot easier than you think, because everyone has the skill to basically ask the most important question when it comes to accessibility, which is, what does this thing do? Or what is this thing and what does it do? So I'm talking like, if you put that in the guise of like a button, right? What is this button supposed to, what is this thing and what does it do? And so taking a step back and asking yourself those critical questions as you create an interface, or you design something, or you write some code, it'll help you start to think about some of the deeper issues when it comes to accessibility. And really everybody has the power to ask those questions and to do a little research and to think about things. So accessibility is, I think, something that can be tackled. You just have to tackle it one little step at a time, right? It's always better to do it and put some, make some improvements and ship them, rather than to get it perfect. I think too often, especially in the accessibility world, perfection is a thing that is aimed for, and nothing is really perfect. So it's always better to shoot for shippable than to shoot for perfect.
And on the topic of accessibility, do you think that we have so many advocates and so many people advocating for accessibility, and there's all these various amounts of education out there, but do you think we might end up at a point where accessibility is the law of the web, where it already is, I think, for public sector and governmental websites, and maybe some educational websites where accessibility has to happen? But I mean, in general, for sites on the web, could we run into a situation where, I don't know, where accessibility is it's the law? Your website has to meet these certain accessibility requirements, or you could be liable for a lawsuit or whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, there was a very recent case in the last few weeks. A giant supermarket company based in Florida called Winn-Dixie, they were sued under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a law in the United States that says traditionally that law has not extended to electronic communications, but more recently, courts have started to use that law to encompass electronic communications. So Winn-Dixie was basically sued because their site wasn't accessible to a customer with disabilities. So it is entirely possible that in the future that could happen. Now, what I hope, obviously, is that we don't end up in a situation where everybody's suing everybody, because that really isn't helpful. What I'd rather see is effort put toward like education and really like structured negotiation where companies sort of just talk to experts and figure out how best to move things forward, rather than getting sued, because that's that's no fun.
No, it's not. But the lawyers would love it.
That's true. I'm not a lawyer, but they probably would.
All right. So to wrap things up, Underscores.me, the project has new life. As you announced earlier this week, Ulrich Pogson is the new committer. He's a mathematician. So it's just one more advocate, one more voice for the community that surrounds Underscores, that relies on it, along with Philip Arthur Moore. And there are some cool things ahead based on what you've learned in your experiments with components that will be implemented in Underscores at some point in the future. And other than that, anything else on your mind that you want to tell us, or you can tell people how they can follow you or get in touch with you on the interwebs?
Yeah, visit my blog, davidakennedy.com, and I'm also on Twitter at David A. Kennedy. And I think my plug would be get involved in Gutenberg.
That's a good one.
I'd also say if you're interested in theming and you don't know where to start, drop into the theme review channel on the WordPress Slack, or on Core Themes, the Core Themes channel on WordPress Slack. I will be happy to answer questions and point you in the right direction. And so will, I think, a lot of other people in the community there.
Yeah, the theme review team is a great place where I know quite a few people who have gotten their start on maybe just knowing the basics or not knowing that much, but after going through the process and hanging out in the Slack channel and learning the process and looking at different code, things of that nature, they become a lot smarter, and it's actually helped them when it comes time for them to develop a theme. They know some of the rights and wrongs because they've seen the wrongs in other people's themes. So it's a great process all around, great learning process for people.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, John, unless you have any further questions, I'm going to let David get on with his afternoon.
No, David, it's nice to meet you. It's finally, and I appreciate you taking on the half hour here to hang out with us. It was really informative, and I'm excited to see what happens with Underscores. It's a cool project, and so I'm happy to see it have new life again.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate y'all's time, and I really appreciate the invite.
Not a problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. David Kennedy. Let's have a round of applause. I don't have any. There we go. Yeah, that's a great soundboard we have here at the studio, at a professional studio here.
High tech.
So before we wrap it up here, there is one news story I wanted to talk about before we get into our picks of the week, and that is we figured out that WordPress 4.9 will focus on managing plugins and themes, and Gutenberg is targeted for WordPress 5.0. So after the success of WordPress 4.8, which added the visual editor to the text widgets and a couple other nifty little features, Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of the WordPress open source project, says he's aiming to see Gutenberg installed on 100,000 sites during the next few months before merging it into Core, which, by the way, folks, if you haven't done so already, Gutenberg is the new visual WordPress editor for creating content that's being worked on. It's a plugin now. You can actually search for and download it from the WordPress.org plugin directory. Give it a try. If you discover any bugs, you can report them on the GitHub account, or even just write a blog post about your experience, about what you did, what you tried, what you expected. Even those reviews are highly insightful and helpful to the development of Gutenberg. And I know Mullenweg says, quote, in the meantime, he thinks that we could do another user-focused 4.9 release with the theme of editing code and managing plugins and themes, or doing version 2s and polishing some features we brought into WordPress last year, end quote. And I think a lot of people would like that. You know, oftentimes there are features added in WordPress that, you know, get to the point and go through the dev cycle, and then that's it. You know, we rarely see version 2s of those things or additional polish. And, you know, we get to the point where, boy, it'd be nice to just have a release where we just version 2 everything. Let's just, no new features. Let's polish everything we got. In fact, that happened a few years ago, I believe. There was actually a WordPress release that was just a maintenance release where the whole dev cycle was dedicated to tying up the tools, processes, bugs, revisiting tickets, cleaning up track. And that was pretty cool to see. Every now and then, I think you got to have one of those.
I think those end up usually being everybody's favorite release. Like they end up having all the little cool, like polish gets put on everything. And so those end up being the releases that people give talks at WordCamps to find some nuanced little thing that got exponentially better to focus on the little details. And I think the 100,000 installs for Gutenberg is an ambitious number. So
that's what I was thinking.
it'll be neat to see how close by the end of the year that number is. And I have to guess, completely speculating, that number is probably intentionally high to try and rally people behind testing it and using it and getting a lot of momentum quickly into it, but also to justify kind of without a doubt why it's a good idea. Like for the small percentage of an audience that still likes to question or scrutinize of the REST API being in core, or maybe it wasn't, there weren't enough installations of the plugin, or not enough people were using it, or putting the cart before the horse, or all the other ways that people like to be critical, that getting that many installs and that much momentum behind it is the best way to justify it. And so as a project, it has a ton of momentum, and it will only gain momentum from now until the end of the year. And so like David had touched on before, I think it's really going to end up being the future of WordPress, whether some people necessarily love it or not. So the best thing that we can kind of do is get behind it and start contributing early and make the new editing experience as good as we can, as quickly as we can together, while we can. It's pretty cool. I've played with it a little bit. It's pretty neat. There's some things that it's early days, and so there are lots of little things where you're like, oh, I expected it to do this, or oh, maybe this would be better, or this would be different, and then you go to make a new issue on GitHub and realize that smarter people that are more deeply involved have already thought of that idea like 4 weeks before you. So it's moving really, really fast and getting exponentially more awesome every day. So yeah, it's going to be really cool to see it evolve and get better and better from now until 5.0 or beyond, if it's not done, or if it's not close to the 100,000 mark. It'll be neat to see how it goes.
WordPress 4.8.1 is tentatively planned for the last week in July, and contributors anticipate including a fix for some of the issues that have been reported with the new text widget stripping out code. So that'll be beneficial for quite a few people out there. So to keep your eye on the lookout for 4.9 and 5.0, which 5.0 looks like they're aiming for the end of this year. But the way things have been going, I wouldn't be surprised if it was early next year, just because maybe it would give more time for Gutenberg to bake, or a lot more people to test it. In a future episode on WordPress Weekly, we're actually going to have a roundtable of people on to talk about their experience and give their impressions of Gutenberg, because this editor is going to fundamentally change the way everybody in WordPress writes and manages content. As you say, whether some people like it or not, depending on if it gets merged in the core. The show's already an hour long, and I want to get into a conversation with you right now about Gutenberg, a post I just published before going on the show. But I will say I did have an opportunity yesterday. I actually used Gutenberg to write about Gutenberg, and it was a very frustrating and cumbersome experience. It was not fun. I know that it's 6 months in and it's very beta, maybe even alpha. There are a lot of things that have to be worked on. But as it stands now, it's nowhere near as efficient and good as the current WordPress editor. And based on some things I've seen, even Mullenweg says that because Medium and other competitors have been around for so long, that what they're looking to do is maybe build on top of some of those ideas and leapfrog the competitors. And now next thing you know, WordPress's editor is like state of the art because it leapfrog the competition. It has a long way to go from today to be able to leapfrog its competitors. But it was just sort of interesting to me to go through the experience for the first time of managing my content, writing my content in blocks, where instead of just hitting enter and creating an unordered list, I now have to click enter and create an unordered list inside of a block, then click enter again. And then if there's an errant paragraph or break line tag, I couldn't highlight text. For some reason it selected all the blocks, which was pretty irritating in and of itself. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to test Gutenberg, you have to write your content and publish it all in one go. If you save your content, move out of the Gutenberg editor, and then come back, your content will no longer be in the Gutenberg editor view. However, it will be in the editor, the current WordPress editor that we have now. So if you think you've lost your content, don't worry, it's still there. You just have to go to the WordPress native editor to be able to edit it.
I'll tell you, everyone that is contributing to Gutenberg right now has their work cut out for them big time. Where there's a little bit of backfilling worth of 13 years of WordPress's tiny and relationship with Tiny MCE. There is anything that is visual, particularly on the web, anything WYSIWYG is really, 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 really hard. And there's so many little things that we're used to, like that you sort of hate, where you're like, oh, I don't like that it auto wraps everything in paragraph tags. And then you realize why it does that. And then you realize that that's great because you don't have to do it yourself. And now we have to reinvent every little thing and scrutinize every decision that's been made over the course of over 10 years worth of time by dozens and hundreds of people. It is going to be a marathon and a sprint at the same time from now until whenever Gutenberg launches. But I wouldn't be surprised if 5.0 still has to ship by the end of the year with or without Gutenberg, because what else are we going to be talking about at WordCamp US in December if there is no 5.0 to celebrate? So hopefully that we've got 6 months, 5 months, 5 months. Everyone should hunker down and double down on giving their all and best to the fabulous new editor that hopefully we'll have by then.
And I want to get into it, but I won't do it today. I want to get into this. Yesterday, I've read a lot of reviews, and especially one that piqued my interest that I covered today on WP Tavern. And I'm really thinking about Gutenberg and why, the question of why Gutenberg. And if you look back at, I'll just say, if you do your research, if you Google, if you try and figure out why WordPress is going with Gutenberg, it's a very difficult question to answer. If you look at the Make blogs, there are not posts of user research data or surveys that have been taken, and there's not a whole lot of material that backs up this decision that a major shift in the editor is warranted, that this is what millions of WordPress users need. And what we've seen is Matt Mullenweg taking over development of WordPress as project lead. That allows him to bypass the consensus-driven model of WordPress development. He can bypass a committee, and he can implement things that he feels should be in WordPress now or should be worked on that maybe have been lagging for the past couple of years. In fact, it's pretty much why he explained why he's the project lead for this year. I just worry as an end user, if WordPress is going to change the way I write content on an everyday basis without giving me a choice. I feel like as a user, entitlement is probably a wrong or a bad word to use. And being owed something, that's probably a bad word to use, right? But I feel like as a user, with this kind of fundamental change, there should be a lot more data, user research. There should be a lot more that convinces me that this is the better option, that this is the way of the future, and back that up with all that stuff, instead of maybe this is just another instance where, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to take your word for it, and when it comes out, I'll use it, I'll test it, I'll see, and see what happens.
So I know you don't want to get into it, but here we go. So one of the things that I think we've heard Matt talk about, even in blog posts or competing podcasts where he's been interviewed recently, that he is thinking about design by committee a little bit, or whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. And one of the more fond memories I have during my time at Automattic was watching two ex-axiomaticians, Pete Davis and Evan Solomon, looking at some WordPress.com user data and some user testing, and the importance of like data-driven development and data-driven decision making, and making sure that you're making the right decisions for the right reasons and wording things the right way, and A/B testing this and that. And all of those things are like 100% totally provable, justifiable things. But at the same time, and I don't know if I'm making this up or if they said it and I should be crediting them with it, but ultimately what the lesson that I took away from it was always sort of data influenced design. It was never driven by everything that everyone is, by the culmination of everyone's data collection, or 80% of everyone says this, and so we have to do this way, or all of our users were really, really saying that this is what they want, and so that's what it is that we should do. It's always sort of gently influenced by those things, but then with having the ability to sort of have the executive override by trusting your gut and knowing that maybe a different decision is still the best thing to do anyways. And so I'll tell you that I know that a lot of people want to have more data, and they want for the decisions like Gutenberg or the REST API or other things to maybe be more heavily influenced by the data that we see, or by the insights that we glean by polling audiences or getting more anonymous user data or whatever those things are. But I got to tell you, I kind of am a big fan of having the freedom to make a different decision anyways. And then we still have the freedom to undo that decision if it turns out it wasn't a really great one. And my example for that I have used in the past is Google Gears. WordPress used to come with a core implementation for a project that Google has long since retired called Gears, that brought in all of your assets locally into local storage, that you'd never have to make those external requests. And so WordPress for one release, maybe two, came with built-in support in the tools menu for Google Gears. And it worked really well, and it was really cool, but it was a thing that was not long for this world, and so was pulled from WordPress core completely. So we have the freedom, and if we didn't have that freedom, I think that we would be more unhappy than we are knowing that we have that freedom. And it isn't just Matt that has that freedom. The REST API team together decided that the REST API was ready for WordPress core. And Matt has said, even if he didn't love the idea or wasn't 100% behind the idea when it went in, after it went in, it's time to rally and be behind it. So I, for one, am still really happy that we have that freedom to make those decisions and to get more insight on the data. than if we didn't have that freedom at all. And
well, the thing Matt has going for him is he's got a stellar track record. He generally does things in the best interest of the project, and there hasn't been too many instances that I can think of off the top of my head where he's made an incredibly bad decision that set the WordPress project on a course for disaster. So I'm willing to trust him and trust his gut and see this all the way through. I just have some thoughts on, it would be nice if, so-and-so and so-and-so, to sort of, back up this kind of major change and major decision. In fact, by the way, listeners, I highly encourage you to check out episode 81 of the Apply Filters podcast. That's from Matt Mulloig, who was interviewed by Pippin Williamson and Brad Tusnard. And this is where he talks about the downsides of the consensus-driven model and managers, and kind of gives you insight into what we're talking about here. But he mentions the fact that MP6, which I think was 5 years ago, he said it was incredibly hard to get MP6 into core. He says the core team actually for a year would not approve of MP6 getting into core. But if you look back at it now, MP6 is what made the WordPress backend responsive. Mm-hmm. And Matt says, if MP6 was not integrated into core back then, it's hard to say whether WordPress today would be relevant because of such the high usage of mobile devices, which have outpaced the desktop. So he highlights the fact that he's very cognizant of the fact that decisions like Gutenberg are things he has to think about in the moment. But are these decisions, are these moments, are these projects that could depending on how they go, could make WordPress relevant or irrelevant in the near future. And he's got to be able to address all these issues and arguments around these major changes, because like you said, what got us here isn't what's going to get us there. And we're kind of seeing that in action live, especially with the Gutenberg project.
MP6 is such a good example of that, because I very distinctly remember myself, but also many other people at the time not being really 100% in support of MP6, because it was sort of the great flattening of everything. We were comfortable and happy with our bevels, our bevels and our transparent pings that we had, and all of our icons were starting to look and feel really like WordPress. They had a very good personality behind them, and I think Ben Dunkel and other people that were involved with the design that was WordPress before MP6 did a really, really good job. And I personally really, really liked it a lot. And so MP6 was like, oh no, I don't really want it to look like this. Oh, I'm not. I had a hard time getting behind it. And now I was totally wrong. I'm totally used to it. It feels like WordPress still. Everything is okay. And I missed out on a lot of possible collaboration with people by not being more supportive or being behind MP6 from the very get-go. So I have learned my lesson via MP6 to try and be behind the REST API and behind Gutenberg pretty much from the get-go, because they've been thinking about these things at least as long or longer than I have, and probably more deeply. And so what is there? There's no harm in offering some insight and maybe a pull request here and there to try and scoot something along a little bit more quickly. So it's exciting, but I think you're right. I think Gutenberg's got a long way to go, and accessibility wise, just UX wise, and just the fit and finish wise, obviously isn't going to be there for a little while. But I was surprised at how far along it actually was, considering how new that it is.
Well, stop right there. I want to ask you something about that. So you're surprised about how far along it is. Yeah. Now we know that. Matt Atmos. See, I'm butchering names. It's Matt. I forgot. Two automaticians. I'll think of them at some point here. They've been
for sure, and Matthias.
Yes, there you go. Thank you very much, sir. And they were assigned project leads for Gutenberg. So if you look at the progress, Matt Mullenweg announces editors a core focus 2016 State of the Word. Beginning of the year, we see the technical document or overview of what Gutenberg is going to be. A month later, we see in February of this year, we see the UI initial prototypes of Gutenberg. A few months later, we have a plugin. You know, it's basically a plugin now that you can test on WordPress.org. So we're looking at, I mean, this is very, for such a major change in WordPress, this is happening, it seems like, at lightning speed.
It definitely
the development of Gutenberg. Do you think that Gutenberg, as it is today, would be at the progress it's at had Matt Mullenweg designed it by committee?
No, absolutely. I don't. I think 100%.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, there's a few things with Gutenberg right now that are making it that it would not be Gutenberg without. And it's, yes, Matt and his ability to push a project like that forward, but Johan and Matthias are brilliant, and they're super nice, and they will take the time to have the conversation with someone if they need convincing, and then they can architect and design and implement all of those things in a way that happens very, very quickly. And so if it weren't for them, I think that they are the right people to be on and behind this project from the start. And they are also the type that will have no problem scrutinizing people's ideas and pull requests and supporting other people's ideas and pushing things through, and then letting go of things that they know that they are maybe not the best equipped for. It's really great to watch them continue to push this on. The other part of with Gutenberg is the React side of it. They got a head start with Calypso. They got an education, earned an education through earning their lumps by, you know, I found an old blog post of mine, I think from 2011 or 12, where I took a screenshot of WordPress.com's like fancy new front end post editor. And it's neither fancy nor amazing, but it was totally different. And you figure this has been an evolution on WordPress.com and from a bunch of people that work at Automattic for easily 7 years now, 6 years for sure. And so Gutenberg's able to come out of the gate real strong, and what will make or break it will be community support. So
I
it seems
just
to have it now. I just hope it continues.
I also think that we're witnessing a little bit of a milestone moment in terms of WordPress development in general, where, hey, Matt takes over, doesn't have to go through community. Man, why do I keep saying community? It's committee. Doesn't need anyone's consensus. This is what he wants. I'm going to get these two people who are automaticians, who are already fluent in React, but based on our development with Calypso, we're going to build this thing. We're going to do it. We're going to get it done. It's going to be in here within a year and a half. We're just going to do that. Now, does this sort of set the stage for certain development aspects of features or what have you for WordPress in the future? Is if we really want to get this done, we're just going to have to, bypass the community. I did it again. This would be a drinking game. We're just going to bypass. The consensus and just do it.
So I think we'll probably see that happen on occasion. I think it's one of those things that is why we are lucky to be able to rotate release leads through as frequently as we are, basically every release.
Do you think we're going to go back to that, release leads, after Matt's finished with leading the project this year?
Sure, I don't see why not. Or release teams, maybe. Maybe the releases are better with teams instead of just one person. They've already sort of a lead and a co-lead, and everyone kind of owns the features and everything. But one of the things that Matt has, and that agencies have, or companies have, or whatever else, is friends. You've got coworkers, colleagues. You've got people that you can pull in and say, hey, this thing means a lot to me, and I would really appreciate your help on this. And If that happens to be a person that's either on the payroll or is your neighbor, I don't know that it really matters, as long as they're the right person for the job and you trust them to do those things. So it's convenient, but also really in an open source project, that's kind of the only thing that you can do. It's not like anyone would, if Matt, or I hate always using Matt as an example because it seems too obvious, but let's say Pippin Williamson is the release lead for WordPress 5.1. Who do you expect for Pippin to try and ask to get things done? He's not going to ask people he doesn't pay, because it's kind of wrong. You're not going to say, hey, not my employee who I can't make do anything, please do this thing for me, unless they're a friend or unless you're actually going to dedicate your own time and resources to doing it and getting it done. So it doesn't seem unusual to me that Matt would ask his own employees, or that a bunch of people at Humanoid would double down on a REST API, or that we've got a team of people or a bunch of people that need and use WP CLI to make sure that little things happen to WordPress core to get WP CLI better supported. It seems like the obvious choice. It seems like the only way that it can really naturally happen, at least until there are so many full-time WordPress core contributors that you have a fleet of dozens or hundreds of people that you can just cherry pick to be the theminator on literally every aspect of WordPress core, the accessibilinator, the pluginator. You need to have someone that is the multi-siteinator. Whatever you need a whole group of people like that. And so I think that seems totally natural and normal right now. But it's not going to always be Matt, and when it is Matt is generally when. I think it's comforting. I think it's nice to know. How about this? I'll even flip this the other direction. I think it's really nice to know that if Gutenberg actually isn't good, which doesn't seem likely to me, but if Gutenberg crashes and burns, that Matt is the one willing to put his reputation on the line for the big risks and gambles like that. Because if someone else was going to do it, they wouldn't maybe potentially have the resources, and they maybe wouldn't be as confident as someone like Matt is, because he is as close to and cares about WordPress as much as he does. I think
I'm just saying that's a great point that you bring up, that he's making himself vulnerable. He's putting himself in that position to where, this is on him. If it crashes and burns, it's on him and no one else.
Yep.
And one of the things he says in an interview with Pippin Williamson is that if there's anything that working on WordPress for 14 years has given him, it's a thick skin.
Right. Exactly. And it's nice to know that we have at the helm as a project lead for WordPress, an individual who is willing to take those kind of risks and in setting, I think, ambitious goals for them. 100,000 installs for Gutenberg is big number, and let's say we get 50,000 is still a big number. And so, do you really wait until the 1,001 installs to go, yay, we're finally over and we can finally pull Gutenberg in? Like, I don't think that it's a literal number, but it does set the bar really, really high, and it gives all of us like a window into what Matt's expectations are for Gutenberg.
That's Matt's MO. Set the bar really high, because why not?
Yep.
Let's see what we can do. Okay, I didn't want to get into it. I'm sorry, listeners. I couldn't help myself. I was like, I want to get into it, and I wrote a great post about some of my thoughts about Gutenberg today on WP Tavern. Okay, it's about an hour and a half. John, I want to tell you, I really enjoyed having these conversations with you. So
I did too.
I mean that, and I hope our listeners enjoy listening to us talk about, the nitty-gritty of WordPress and these decisions and the things that are going on from an end user and developer perspective. This is Gutenberg, this is big stuff. I mean, you're going to hear Gutenberg about 1 million times before now and whenever it's released. And you're going to see it on the tavern 1 million times, throughout the community 1 million times. It's just, that's the thing everybody is focused on, because it's such a huge fundamental change for everybody. The editor, everybody uses the editor in some way. And so it's going to be great to sort of look on the progress, monitor, and really see how the end product ends up. Who knows? It could blow me away, and I really hope it does. And I hope it leapfrogs the competitors, because it would be great to sort of say, John, remember we had that conversation? Matt did this, did that, and in 1 year, boom, here we are. WordPress is state of the art again, and we've got the best editor in its class. That would be.
It'll happen. I'm willing to guarantee, even though I'm not the person that should be guaranteeing this, but I bet from now until WordCamp US, there will probably be at least like 2 major things that happen with Gutenberg where we all go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, right? Like, it's not there yet, but there will probably be at least 2 things where you're like, wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. Like,
yeah, now I'm on board now.
Yep. And so we don't have that yet, but there'll be at least 2 of those things where you like we're all pretty convinced. And I don't know. The one thing that, tangentially, I know we're closing up, but the one thing that I would like to see from now until WordCamp US, I would like something secret and cool to happen inside of Gutenberg. like I want the one more thing type. Oh, I didn't know that was. Oh, that's awesome. Like, I kind of want that grand reveal for it. And so since it is a big deal, and since there's a lot of time and effort going into it, part of me secretly hopes that there's a secret sauce in the background that is being worked on that maybe will drop late, or we'll see fully flesh something out that we didn't.
Wouldn't it be cool if we're sitting in the audience and Matt plays this video and you hear it's of Gutenberg doing that secret sauce, and that you hear the audience go, ooh, and you hear like people start clapping, which has happened in previous release videos.
It definitely has. I think we'll see it happen, but I hope it's surprising. I hope it's cool. Yeah.
So we've already gone way too beyond what I wanted to for the show. We're going to skip the picks this week, but we have them for next week. I guarantee you we're going to do them next week. Speaking of next week, I have a guest plan. It's going to be Kiko Doran and Travis Tots. We're going to talk about
awesome.
Kiko just launched a huge project he's been working on for months with Pharrell. It's called Tuniversity. It's actually part of Apple. And it's a really innovative, cool way to learn music. And they use Pharrell's Happy Song, and you get to learn about rhythms and beats and all these different cool interactions, and you use iBook and all these different programs that Apple has in its ecosystem. And everybody has been ranting and raving about this project, but we're going to talk about that project, and Kiko wants to share some of the lessons he's learned about outsourcing some of his project to a design agency, but still having that control to be able to really have the final product he wants. So we're going to have both of those gentlemen.
I'm going to warn everyone. I'm going to warn everyone now, including you, Jeff, that Kiko and I are. This is going to be a 2-hour episode next week. You're going to have to shut me up, because Kiko showed me this early on in like the early stages, and I wished very heavily that I was in a place to have been a part of it, because it is a very super cool project. The overlap with code and music and everything is sort of right up my alley, and I'm super excited to talk to Kiko about it next week. It's going to be an awesome episode.
2-hour extravaganza. You heard it here first, folks. So you can find show notes for this episode and all other episodes on WPTavern.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jeffro, JEFFR0, where I can give you a 140-character review of Gutenberg throughout the year. I will be posting many. And John, where can people follow you?
Follow me on Twitter or GitHub at JJJ, and you can read my opinions and pictures of my dog on my blog at jjj.blog.
Excellent. Everybody enjoy the rest of the weekend. Please have a safe and happy 4th of July, Independence Day here in the U.S. Do not, like that one football player, and blow off your finger. That's just dumb. And please don't watch any episodes of Jackass before this weekend. That's also dumb. Anyways, we'll talk to you again next Wednesday afternoon, everybody. So long.
See y'all.